Your life passes you by. You see how everything fades away. All the people you love begin to die. You forget how precious memories are. I'm a renegade, walking through the fire, with a heart of steel, a burning desire. I'm the voice of the voiceless, the misunderstood. With fearless conviction, I rise as I should, breaking down walls. Let's challenge the norms.
Chapter 2. The band were in full swing, an amateurish Smith's knockoff, making the term live sound like an exaggeration. It sounded like a scene from a not so long ago released movie by George A. Romero set to music. The club was basically a large rectangular room with windows down either side. There was a bar at one end, centred, and in front of it, half the length of the hall was given over to a carpeted seating area. Round wooden tables and their accompanying chairs were dotted informally around, with a respectable distance between them and the bar to allow for crowds to gather on nights such as this. At the end of the dance floor was the stage, currently occupied by the singing zombies, little more than a plinth raised 6 inches higher than the rest of the floor. Nearly a quarter of this was taken up by the band's speaker system, leaving them less than adequate space to produce a sound which, no matter how loudly they made it, became less musical with each of their own songs. A quick scan of the room would tell any onlooker that the punters here didn't seem to care in the least. They chatted about their own important issues, oblivious to the fact that it was necessary to shout to be heard by the person who was less than a foot away. "You're late," showed a thin-faced man sat at the fringe of the group as Marshall took his seat with a recently acquired pint. "I thought you must be on nights." He stood up to his full 6 feet to allow Marshall to squeeze past him into a bench seat. "It's a bit quiet in here tonight," Marshall shouted back. "I'm told it's going to get packed later," the tall man smiled back. "Any word from the wench?" "I've told you we don't call her that. She's the love of my life no matter what she's done." "You're right, sorry. Any word from the bitch?" "That's more like it. No need to be disrespectful after all." "Ah, you got me a beer. Very thoughtful." "Get your own, Marky." "Come on, mate. I'll get 2 on the next visit." "Deal," smiled Marshall as he slid the pint across to his pal. A debatably overweight man with a wispy beard leaned across Marshall to address the tall man. "Get us all one if you're going, Marky." "Flipping it round, even with all this noise you can hear chat about beer." "Priorities, mate. Don't call me that, it's insulting." "Well, you are round, and I wasn't trying to cheer you up, you fat oaf." "Charming," said the larger man. "That's got to be a free beer." Marky made a thumbs up sign with a sarcastic grin and turned back to Marshall and shrugged. Marshall half smiled, half smirked and turned his attention to the rest of the group. Across the table to his left, Derek and Jez worked together in industrial therapy and were engaged in some private joke. They didn't seem to have noticed he was there yet. Next to them, Shauna was looking straight at him, head cocked slightly to one side, like she was inspecting him. She nodded when he caught her eye, and he nodded back. Marky leaned in towards Marshall's ear and faced away from Shauna. "The Jamaican Queen's checking you out again, I see." Marshall didn't respond, but merely smiled at Shauna. "What does it actually take for you to get the hint?" Marshall kept the smile in place and spoke through his teeth like a bizarre ventriloquist. "Not interested, Timothy." "Ooh, harsh. Hair back on, China." Timothy was Marky's real name, and a good way to end an unwanted conversation with him, since he hated it with a vengeance. Somebody had joked that he looked like Marky posed once, which then stuck, and he was secretly grateful for it. Next to Shauna was Elaine, who was in turn speaking to Nicola. They worked as nursing assistants on one of the elderly care wards, and were no doubt sharing some riveting story about the day's exploits and laughing it over. Nicola gave a little wave to acknowledge his eye contact, which redirected Elaine's attention. Elaine smiled wide-eyed at him. Her enthusiasm for everything was inspiring, and she threw her arms wide and then drew them across her chest like she was sending him a remote hug. Marshall smiled back, as much to himself as to them, because he found them all amusing and cherished them all in different ways. Shauna had her face turned to them, trying to look like she wasn't still looking at him. He jumped slightly then, as someone put their hands on his shoulders from behind. He half turned so he could see who it was, and a slim girl with cropped hair was smiling down at him. "Erica!" he exclaimed. "What are you doing here?" "I heard you were newly single, and I figured I'd check you were okay." She leaned down and pecked him on the cheek. "You seem in pretty good form, though." "I'm okay, just getting used to living back in halls." Shauna was suddenly too interested to keep up the ruse that she wasn't looking. "It's weird, but I feel like I never actually left." "Well," she replied, "keep your nose clean and stay out of trouble. I'll see you at work tomorrow." Without waiting for a reply, she bounced off towards the bar. "That girl is entirely too brainy to look like Daphne. She should look like Velma by rights," shouted Marky. Marshall stared after her. "No arguments from me. Benny's a lucky man." "Brand new set of students moving in Monday, bro." It was Marky. "I'm guessing you'll be spending more time in your room over the next few weeks." His grin was like a literary cat. "Probably, Marky, but it's because I have 4 days of mixed shifts after tonight and a distinct lack of folding green, not because of any of your fantasies about what I should be doing with my time. I'm not really 20 anymore, and neither are you." "Both sad and boring, Marsh. It's a tragedy." Marky nodded towards the front door. "Bundu's just in. Have you heard the latest about him?" "I don't need to, mate. That's why I have you, remember?" "Oh, ha, ha. Seriously, he's been hanging around the nurses' home on several occasions. There's a book running on who it is he's secretly seeing. And of course how long it will take for his wife to find out. I give it about 3 weeks tops." Pointy Bundu was the charge nurse on the ward where Marshall worked. He'd been working there for more years than most could speculate, and was one of the Mauritian militia, as he and his compatriots were affectionately known. One of the cohort who trained in hospitals like this throughout the mid to late 70s, following an NHS recruitment drive there. Most were charge nurses, ward sisters or nurse tutors by now, with an interesting mixture of authority and archaic notions to their work styles, which reflected both their Indo-French culture and the mindset they'd inherited about psychiatry from their home. There was only one asylum on Mauritius, where they routinely herded the patients into a courtyard first thing each morning to give them a bath with a fire hose. Barbarism versus Victorianism. Marshall trudged along the left side of the dance floor heading for the bar, and Marky lowered his voice as he drew closer, even though there was little chance of being overheard with the level of noise. "My money's on the new African nurse in room 204. Just about then the band decided to take a break, and they fell silent, reducing the room noise to about a murmur. Marky's voice stayed at its reduced but still loud level. "Not the best looking, but about his mark." There was a pregnant pause, whilst it felt like most of the room looked in Marky's direction. Then a loud cheer went up, accompanied by generalised chuckling. Marshall put his face in his hands, and Marky spread his arms and scanned the room with an indignant look on his face. "What?" rest of the evening was spent discussing work and an upcoming dance evening at the club, amongst other trivia. Next Saturday saw the aforementioned new students' first weekend here, and the tradition was that a big disco night was on the cards. They usually attracted the younger contingent, but most of the residents of the nurses' accommodation would likely turn up at some point in the evening. Such was the predictability of this community. By the time Marshall left to head back to his room, it had started to rain outside, and he cursed the stupid jacket he'd chosen to wear for style over substance. Marky, Shauna and Elaine followed him out, still talking and laughing over their conversations he didn't really care about that much, and he mused to himself as he walked, face turned down and collar turned up against the elements, about his work and the idea that he didn't want to do this for the rest of his life. The effects of the beer and the come down after all the shouting and singing along to the terrible band was making him melancholy, he knew, but he pined for a life he didn't yet know nevertheless, and set himself to trudging the quarter mile back to his bed. It was 11:30 and a 6:50 a.m. start was on the cards. Elaine rushed up from behind him and slipped her arm through his. "You planning on going to sleep, or are you coming up to Marky's for a bit? He's got a bottle he says he wants to use up, and Shauna and I are going to help." Marshall made a face. "I'm up early, and being still drunk going to work's not my style, to be honest." He made the apologetic face again. "Enjoy yourselves though, and I'll see you tomorrow or something." "I'm gutted, Marsh, but I know someone who'll be even more disappointed." She raised her eyebrows knowingly. "Don't start, Elaine. You're as bad as Marky with that shit. I just want to sleep. Maybe another time?" "Disappointing? I can't say I'm surprised. You seem different somehow lately." "It's nothing," he said. "Just tired, that's all." "Well," she shrugged, "it's no problem if you need your beauty sleep." "You coming to mine, Marsh?" Marky. "We've just been discussing it, and Grandad is off to bed," called Elaine over her shoulder. "Oh, damn boring then," said Marky, a taunt designed to make Marshall change his mind. Shauna tried to hide her downcast look without complete success. "Another night, mate," Marshall deflected. "I've got 4 on the bounce, remember? I just want to get out of this weather and get some sleep." "Yes, fine. Lightweight. We'll discuss it tomorrow." Chapter 3. Darla was a student nurse. As of tomorrow, she'd completed the 13-week psychiatric placement of her general nurse training and was looking forward to going back to her parent hospital to do some real nursing. Not that the tedious attention from seemingly every male member of staff she came across would stop once she was there. All her Catholic girl contemporaries, first time away from their mummies and apparently making up for lost time in the boy department, were obviously much more comfortable with it than she. She knew it was old-fashioned, but she was determined to stick to her plan of marrying her one true love and settling down to have bands somewhere back in her own country. All this made her seem standoffish to some, and apparently meant she must be a lesbian to others. "Feckham," she thought as she fumbled for a room key in her handbag. She was an Irish cliché drinker, and tonight had been no exception. She cursed the last Jamesons and lemonade like it was the sole cause of her current state, and swayed slightly in a non-existent breeze of impatience. She found her keys and held them aloft like a priceless archaeological find before fumbling again, this time to insert it into a lock which bobbed and weaved and avoided the operation. "Having trouble?" said a voice, which caused her to start. "Oh, 'tis you," she said. She threw her arms down by her sides in exasperation. "You made me jump. This feckin' lock is too small for my key. Would you help me get inside?" "Of course. And after tonight, you won't have to worry about this place ever again."